Welcome back to another episode of Dynasty Theory, a proud member of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast Network. I'm your host, John Bauer. Find me on Twitter at the Bauer Club. I am so excited for this episode. We finally had real football. Week 1 is behind us. We have something to talk about now. It's no longer speculation, but I'm sure we're going to speculate just a little bit. We are joined by none other than Dan Lamagna. That is at FF Coach Dan on Twitter. What's going on, Dan?
Man, I thought you were excited because we had, special guests that only our patrons could see if they're viewing live. We got the Rock Johnson on the show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So you're going to have to tune in to actually see it. But not only has the Rock got some Terramana cooking behind me, but yes, week 1, our lineups were cooking, man. And, Dynasty, I'm proud. I'm feeling good. 11-5 overall start, guys, so feel good about that. Redraft, not so pretty. A little slow start on redraft, so I'm worried I'm carrying a little too much Dynasty into the redraft. We'll see what week 2 brings. DFS, thanks to Zay Jones' Monday night overtime thriller, I actually was able to recoup a little bit of the money I lost in week 1, but did better than last year. Week 1 is so tough. It's so unpredictable. And I think we'll get into that tonight, probably with all our reactions and, overreactions.
We're definitely going to get into it, and you hit the nail on the head. There's so many things that we go into week 1 thinking we know, but then these NFL teams, they go, not so fast. We have another idea here. Unfortunately, we can't get rid of this man. That's Mitch Sorensen at DynoMC on Twitter. What's up, Mitch?
That's right. Thinking of not getting rid of anything. So now I know, Dan, you have like a life-size cutout of The Rock and Dak. I'm wondering who else you're going to be pulling out here soon. Do we have like a Stone Cold Steve Austin just hanging out in the back that needs to come out at some point?
Anything is possible on Dynasty Theory. So you just got to stay tuned. We got 16, 17 more weeks to go, and then the postseason. So who knows?
I'm very excited to see what guest joins us next week. So we have a lot we want to get through tonight. And the first thing really on the agenda is the San Francisco 49ers. We found out earlier today that Raheem Mostert, because of some knee issues, he is going to miss the remainder of the 2021 season. He made it 2 plays, 2 rushing attempts, I believe. Mm-hmm. And then he was out, which probably a little bit earlier than a lot of people expected. But Raheem Mostert always seems to be that guy. We don't want to say somebody's injury prone, but Raheem Mostert, if there was somebody that was a little injury prone, it might be Mr. Mostert. So, Mitch, what are you doing with this backfield? Because Elijah Mitchell, he completely took over in week 1. He wowed. He dazzled. JaMychal Hasty, I think he had 1 carry. How many carries did Trey Sermon have? Well, he wasn't active. And that hurts us. So how are we navigating through this situation for dynasty purposes?
For me personally, it's if I have Mitchell on my team, I'm pretty happy. I don't really want to go out and try to get him at whatever price he is now because I'm scared that people are going to expect a first. And there's just no possible way I'm willing to give that for a 6th round draft pick. And so I'm looking at it. We still have Jeff Wilson, who is going to come back at some point this year. And honestly, I can't tell you now if I think it's going to be Mitchell we care about in the fantasy playoffs, if it's Sermon we're going to care about, if it's Wilson we're going to care about. It might be Hasty that we care about at this point with this backfield. It's just how this backfield always goes. And it's, Dan brings up DFS, and DFS we care about specific running backs in specific weeks. But looking at this in Dynasty, I can't tell you who I want to pick for week 5. So I'm definitely not willing to go out and just throw picks for a running back who spiked against the Detroit Lions. It's going to happen all season long.
You mentioned Jeff Wilson, and I know that's on a lot of people's minds here, right? He's lurking in the distance. He is going to be coming back, but does he come back as soon as people expect or hope? And does he have that role that's going to be necessary to really take over this backfield? We could just see an absolute cluster. And that's kind of what, Mitch, you're talking about. And it kind of makes the situation in a void. Dan, you were really high on Trey Sermon throughout the offseason, and you talked him up so well and so much and so often that I really started to believe in him. And I went out and acquired a few shares. Nothing crazy, nothing, completely earth-shattering, but there are a few shares sitting on my roster. What are we doing with Trey Sermon right now after the week 1 inactive?
We are being patient. That's what we're going to do. We're going to be patient, JB. Man, we saw this with Cam Akers last year and other rookie running backs throughout time where it takes some time. All right.
We didn't see a rather strange week 1 inactive from them, though.
Yeah, it stings a little bit. It stings a little bit. But, I mean, who's he still competing with here? I think the 49ers backfield situation, I'm treating it a little bit like we kind of do hit New England historically. I know a lot of people like to kind of stray away from the New England Patriots running backs, but one thing that stood out in the past, I remember Evan Silva once saying, man, New England running backs win championships. And I don't want to forget that the 49ers have a soft as jelly late season, fantasy football schedule. And if I could gather a few of these running backs on my roster and, hopefully whether it's Jeff Wilson, whether it's Trey Sermon, whether Elijah Mitchell's for real, whoever it may be, hopefully one of us and our listeners have that hot hand late in the season. But I do believe the cream rises to the top. And, for whatever reason, it's not Trey Sermon's time right now. He hasn't overcame the other running backs. But again, there's always more that goes on behind those closed doors. So I like Mitch's take too on Elijah Mitchell. I'm very happy if I have him on my roster right now. I think he's worthy of a free agent pickup, but I'm not going to overspend because when it does get to those late season weeks at the end of the year, I do believe it's going to be Trey Sermon or Jeff Wilson.
Well, I have to believe when you mention a free agent pickup, you're referring to redraft because he's not sitting on the waiver wire or in free agents. And
not many. There are some. There's one or two where I have seen him out there. We're in enough leagues. I mean, I there's one or two.
So
more often than not, no though.
Mitch, what are you making a face about over there?
Oh, my computer just went weird. Never seen that happen before.
Can you hear us? Can you?
I can. We are good. We're good to go. No, why? Yeah, that was odd.
All right. So Elijah Mitchell, we talk about what he did against Detroit. For me, he's still a 23-year-old rookie running back taken in the 6th round by the 49ers. And it seems like the 49ers are always one of those teams under Mr. Shanahan, like the Seattle Seahawks. They don't really care about draft capital. So if they took Trey Sermon in the 3rd, that's all fine and dandy. But if Elijah Mitchell is their guy, that's going to carry a little bit more weight than maybe a 6th-round draft pick for a team where draft capital certainly is going to be more on their radar and a priority. But what do you, Mitch, in terms of Dynasty, you have Elijah Mitchell on your team.
Yep.
You're a contender. What are you looking to do with him? I've seen a lot of people say, hey, I'm just going to ride him until the wheels fall off. We had that in our Discord yesterday. I don't know if I exactly agree with that sentiment, but I want you to share your thoughts first.
It depends on the return I could get. So I only have him a couple leagues. I'm guessing I used a 3rd or a 4th round pick. Let's just say a 3rd just to make it a little bit easier, right? So I used a 3rd round pick on him and I'm contending now. And so then it turns into, is he going to help me contend more than me being able to trade him? If I could get a 1st, of course I'm out. I don't think it's realistic, but I think that's what people are having in their heads right now, right? So am I going to move him to if someone's trading for him, they're going to want to be a contender as well. So am I then moving him for a late 2nd? So I'm turning my mid 3rd round pick into a late 2nd round pick next year. I'd probably just rather have Mitchell at that point. So unless I'm helping out my roster at a different spot, I just don't see a huge reason to move him on a contender.
Something I've been trying to do is that old package him with a 2nd for a 1st. As long as I'm not in a situation where I believe I'm going to be that 201, 202, I have a fairly competitive team, then it makes sense. But we're not looking to just give him away. And we've talked about this so many times. While the profile historically isn't one we're seeking, and I know his measurables, you look at the different graphs and all the information available and the advanced metrics, he does pop, but he's still a 23-year-old rookie that is in a situation where it could be Elijah Mitchell this week, could be Trey Sermon next week, could be, somebody's hasty, somebody's grandmother. I don't know who it's going to be.
Kerryon Johnson on the practice squad.
Kerryon Johnson on the practice squad. Now, wouldn't it just be an absolute kick in the you-know-what if Kerryon got elevated before Trey Sermon? At that point, it's like something else is going on because, and I want to transition over to Trey Sermon a little bit more. Trey Sermon, his camp was fine. And I know Elijah Mitchell, he missed a little bit of time with that hip injury. And there were a lot of reports coming out. Well, Elijah Mitchell really outperformed Trey Sermon. And that's fine, when looking at what they did at camp. But I don't think what Elijah Mitchell did has anything to do with Trey Sermon not being active. I feel like there's something else going on there. Some mind game, something going on. Because look what happened with Brandon Aiyuk, a guy that was an absolute stud last year. Mitch.
Well, I was just like, you brought it up before in the Discord. The special teams factor could matter. I didn't look in to see how much Hasty was playing on special teams, right? But Trey Sermon isn't going to be playing on special teams.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the things that, not trying to justify, but maybe some rationale behind it, an explanation. When you go back and look, Elijah Mitchell, I think he played on 2%, like 1 or 2 special teams plays. Was it at the very beginning of the game? I don't know. So maybe
I'm worried about Hasty more than Mitchell, because I could see if you have your running back 1 in Mostert, your running back 2 in Mitchell, that third running back, I'm assuming, I mean, we could go up and look after the show and I'll correct it on Twitter if I'm wrong. But that third running back, I mean, I see Dan shaking his head. That third running back has to play on special teams, or has to be able to play on special teams.
And we even see that with wide receivers. And we talked about receivers like Kelvin Harmon, for example. Oh my God, Hakeem Butler. Those are guys that kind of slipped in NFL regard because they weren't going to go in and play special teams. And that's a concern. So I do agree with that to an extent. It still blows my mind. And Mitch, are you looking up the Hasty special teams snaps? For some reason, I want to say it wasn't significant. But again, maybe the plan was to use him that way. But then the injury to Raheem Mostert early on kind of shifted that.
That's right. I think, if Mostert's the clear one going into that game, and then, Mostert just didn't do it enough to beat out Hasty. And then is there something else, JB, like you're mentioning? I think like the media throughout these camps, they have, access to certain portions of practice. They don't see everything. They're definitely not in the meetings rooms. These 49ers beat reporters didn't do enough to get us this scoop between, Sermon and Aiyuk. They left us hanging a little bit, man. They left us here a little high and dry. So there definitely could be something else. And similar in Dallas, La'el Collins, their right tackle's out.
Only Dan is going to bring this back to the Cowboys.
But it's a media thing. I didn't know this guy had any issues. Next thing you find out, he's failed some, the drug policy for the league,
right?
And he missed his tests. So he's a hot mess. So again, something you have no clue about. But here in the fantasy world, we're impacted by Sermon.
Mitch, did you find that information?
Yeah, Mitchell had 2 kick coverage, and so did Hasty. They both had 2 snaps.
But again, maybe the plan was a little bit different if Raheem Mostert was, healthy throughout the entire game. Now, there's a comment in the chat, and I want to preface this with, I don't have any source behind this. It's a comment in the chat from our friend Owen, and he read, big disclaimer here, who knows where this came from. So, Owen, if this is wrong, I'm yelling at you, buddy. He read that Brandon Aiyuk and Trey Sermon situation might be vaccine related. I don't know anything. I have not seen anything about that.
I mean, and I also saw that it was curfew related too. I mean, there's rumor about that. So whatever it is, I honestly think this is not going to be a big deal. Week 2, he's going to be active, and we'll see how many carries he gets. That's my honest opinion. I just think this is just something that everyone's grabbing onto because Mostert got injured, and that's how it is.
And again, we have to take into consideration the fact the 49ers play the Detroit Lions, and everybody, Matthew Berry's on Fantasy Football Now saying Raheem must start. He is a top 10 play. So we all like that situation heading into that game. It just went from Mostert to Elijah Mitchell, who surprisingly wasn't involved in the passing game whatsoever. So he had a great game on the ground, but through the air, I don't think he received 1 target. And
I feel bad for Mostert too, guys. Like, we're not mentioning that. I know we're doing deep analysis here, man, but you talk about a talented dude with a chip on his shoulder who's passionate about the game and just cannot catch a break, man. What a blow.
All right, so Trey Sermon, I want to get this back in Dynasty because we could talk about all these situations all night, and I would be okay with that. I don't know if you guys would.
We know.
Yeah, I know. So Trey Sermon, I'm still willing to move any second for him.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
I think that's
I mean, I would move any second. I just don't know if it's going to work. I think the whole Sermon thing is there's 11 teams in the league that will say, yeah, I'll send a second for him. And the one team with Sermon is like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Now, what about they're a contender? Not that they were counting on Sermon, but hey, somebody that could kind of pitch in throughout the season. Do you think there's a better opportunity to move a win now piece to acquire Sermon? Or do you think in most situations, people are saying, I want to see how this plays out and potentially see the value completely bottom out?
The best offer I received for Sermon was from one of our patrons who offered me Melvin Gordon coming off, a big carry, big game, and I swiftly declined. I respect the offer, but again,
I sent the same offer today. And it got declined.
All right, 0 for 2 on Melgo.
I think this is the perfect opportunity for people to attempt to move Melvin Gordon. I think the most offers I received so far, and this being recorded on Tuesday, up to this point in the week, included me acquiring Melvin Gordon. All the offers I've been receiving. So Trey Sermon. I mean, Mitch, are you? I know we just said a second, probably not going to get it done, but you're okay paying that price. Would you go at like 2 seconds?
Yeah. I'd be more than happy to do it. I wouldn't be willing to give like the 109 or 110 is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be willing to do that a week ago either. So this news didn't really change much for me.
So Dan, long story short, does any of this that we talked about the last 16 minutes that we took up of everybody's lives here that they'll never get back, does it really impact your value of Trey Sermon whatsoever? Or are we too optimistic here that it's going to work itself out, even though Elijah Mitchell did look good?
I think we've given our listeners at least a lot of scenarios depending on where the roster is and what they're looking to do. But I don't want to get burnt if Sermon has a major role in that soft late season schedule just for a second or even 2 seconds next year. Like if I'm a contender, I just want to hang on to those Niners running backs and see what sticks for late in the season. It really Niners players all together. That's kind of one of my strategies going into the season where I could get some Niners and hopefully have them down the stretch. Whether it's Trey Lance, Aiyuk, Sermon, I'm holding on. Unless you wow me, or if I'm rebuilding, then 2 seconds might be better than Sermon because I don't really care what happens late in the season, and you're giving me some more upside there with the extra second.
Last thing on the 49ers, another situation, Brandon Aiyuk, Mitch, really quickly, you're not a contender. Do you move Cooper Kupp for him straight up? Or are you looking to go a different direction?
Get a lot more for Cooper Kupp, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Agreed. Right. I'm liking Cooper, man. I'm liking the Rams.
So essentially what we're saying here, Brandon Aiyuk, probably a hold, and I hate to say it, but probably a hold. All right,
JB, one thing on Aiyuk, he is a hold, and I'm not so much concerned about him bouncing back to contributing, but I am a little bit more about expectations. Like it might be the best trade I made this offseason was not getting Aiyuk. I thank everyone maybe who declined me because I was willing to pay. I saw a high ceiling for him. It's that high ceiling that I'm worried about right now. Like, is he just wide receiver 2 material? That's a good contributor to our team, and not that like potential of being in that CD Lamb, like that rookie class that we had hopes for. So I am concerned about his ceiling.
And then just the way Deebo Samuel looked, it even impacted to an extent in a high-scoring game, while the 49ers did pull out ahead early, so it was kind of deceiving. But even George Kittle was a little bit limited in that game. So there's a lot to look at here in San Francisco. How much of it really should we be taking into account? How much of it is Shanahan and his mind games? Well, we're going to see very soon here, right? Week 2 is going to tell us a lot. So it's going to go from an overreaction or underreaction to, hey, it's time to react a little bit to this situation if it played out any differently than what we had in our minds going into the season. And speaking of situations where we're overreacting or we should be reacting, Mitch, I want to start with you. One situation. I told you guys pick one situation. I have 7 listed here under each one.
Good Lord.
No, I'm not going to touch up. Well, I'm probably going to touch all of them.
Yes, you are.
Don't lie, JB.
Listen, this is gold and the people need to hear it. If I typed it, it needs to be said. That's just, I think it's imperative this week to discuss all this. So, Mitch, give me a situation that you see, and I know we haven't really been on Twitter too much trying to avoid that particular bubble, but that you've seen overreactions and you know for a fact they are overreactions and we need to come back down a little bit.
Yeah, it's the whole Green Bay against the Saints thing. So they lost like 38-3.
Yep.
But like I always go back to Rodgers has one of these games every single year. Last year in Tampa Bay, they lost 38-10. In 2019, they went to San Francisco and lost to them 37-8. I mean, there's just one of these games every season to where the Packers go on the road and they just get blitzed. Like they're not competitive at all and they're just going to lose. And so there's nothing that got worse on this team. I mean, looking at it, just taking a step away from that game and being like, they still got Aaron Jones. AJ Dillon's there. They probably improved their wide receivers a little bit. And Devontae Adams was dropping balls. I mean, that's just not going to happen weekly. And so
that reminds me of him during his rookie year.
Yeah. Hey, so maybe it's a regression thing. Hey, regression is finally coming back, but no. So I actually don't really know. Don't think you could go and get Devontae Adams for any less. You probably are not really going to get Aaron Rodgers for less. One person I think you can.
Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones.
I agree with that.
Aaron Jones is the guy to where I'm willing to pay last week's price right now, and I don't think I need to. I think I could actually offer less right now and still get Aaron Jones.
Now, I try to remember takes that we've brought up, and it's funny that you brought up Aaron Jones, and I'm gonna put you on the spot here. You labeled him as a player to move heading into 2021 throughout the at least the beginning of the season here. But you think maybe his price has dropped enough to justify acquiring him now at that?
Yeah, I mean, I have him pretty low in my tier. So, I mean, he's above like the Mike Davis, James Robinson types but like, I know what I'm getting. I am paying for this year. I am going to hopefully get a top 10 running back on a very good offense. There's not a lot of those guys you could go and get. In fact, there might only be 10 of them. And so if I have to go out and I have to do that to be a contender and maybe move some younger pieces for it, that's something I'm willing to do because I still do want to win championships. I know the offseason, we talk about value. But this is the time of year to when I want to win that championship. I could worry about that value championship belt in February. I don't care about it today.
Dan, is there any concern here for you? Or do you also see this as just, well, let's sweep it under the rug here. Let's forget about it. Week 2 comes along. It's erased from our memory.
I mean, for this season in Green Bay, anytime you have Aaron Rodgers, there's going to be future fantasy production. I think they'll fix a lot. I am skeptical what's going to happen a year from now, 2 years from now. You have a coach that can't win a big game versus, a very good coach. You have Aaron Rodgers who could be on his way out, whether it's a trade this year or next year. And then Aaron Jones is left on an island with Jordan Love and, maybe a Packers team that's not the same without Aaron Rodgers. So for this year, I'm not so much concerned, but I am a little skeptical in Green Bay, just trying to separate what's more football related versus fantasy football related right now.
Put you guys on the spot here. Aaron Rodgers, and looking at my tiers, I didn't really, I don't want to say I didn't react at all. The only quarterback I really moved was Ryan Fitzpatrick because of the injury, which obviously that makes sense. But looking at Aaron Rodgers, I would move Deshaun Watson for him today still.
Yeah. Well, I'm not getting Watson anywhere, so no, I would not do that.
Well, no. I'm moving Deshaun Watson for Aaron Rodgers.
Yes, I would, but this is the caveat I always like to add. I don't have Watson anywhere, so I'd be willing to move Watson for Baker. That's just how I view it.
What about Cousins in a second for Rodgers?
Yeah,
would you do it? And do you think it could ever get done?
No, people do not like Kirk Cousins.
Cousins in 2 seconds?
No, I don't think so. People do not like Kirk Cousins. I mean, people hate Danny Dimes. People hate Kirk Cousins.
What about Carson Wentz in a couple seconds? I'm trying to avoid adding that first, as you can tell. We're negotiating here. I don't want to add my first.
You're just not picking quarterbacks that I want to acquire either. So I'm like, meh. Yeah.
All right. So you still want that filet mignon price, maybe even if you're getting a cheap piece of sirloin, right?
That's a way to put it.
Mitch is like, don't talk about grilling.
You don't eat meat.
No, I don't eat ground meat. There's a big difference. There's a big difference.
We learned something tonight.
Aaron Rodgers, Ryan Tannehill. Two guys that, Ryan Tannehill underwhelmed.
Yeah, I think I have them right in the same tier. So
I would
find that.
Dan?
Yeah, you got a little more youth in Tannehill, and sure.
And then I think Stafford, people are going to take him. I think Tua, people are going to take him. So it really comes down to that Baker, Zach Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Mac Jones, Kirk Cousins, Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts. I think people are now going to take him over Rodgers.
Yeah, people will do that. I wouldn't, but people will.
The market shifts very, very quickly. The market shifts very quickly, and I'm still taking a lot of heat. The fact that I had to eat at Applebee's here in the chat, I'm still taking heat. I'm never telling you guys again what I eat for dinner because whatever. All right, so Aaron Jones, I think that price is dropping a little bit. I think there is legitimate concern, but also the price drop is on the horizon, right? It's right around the corner, especially if Aaron Rodgers leaves and there's a lot of unknowns here. And then he's going to be 27 years old. And, for running backs, might as well take him, sit on the couch, grandpa. You can't go near the field. But Devontae Adams' price probably isn't changing. Robert Tonyan, I do think his price is going to drop significantly just because he was on that unstable ground as is. Robert Tonyan, 1 year, really bolstered by the touchdown production. I think his price drops.
It's fair.
And I'm just getting nods. You guys are sick of me tonight.
Green Bay is just not exciting for me, for JB.
Now, I understand Dan's point of view on it too. Like all the guys, like this team could be horrible next year. So why are you buying into it this year? I could understand that.
Rodgers, though, is somebody that I'm going to test the waters on because they have Detroit here next week. And that value is going to that value is going to jump right back up. And then we saw somebody in the chat saying in our Discord about, hey, what if Aaron Rodgers came back just to give a middle finger to the Packers?
After week one.
Another interception. Sorry, another interception.
Till they trade him.
Right. So I think the Packers are a really good situation on a team not to overreact. And for the most part, my value on those players has not changed.
To your point, the best point I think you made there, JP, was they play Monday night at Green Bay versus Detroit. Ticked off team at home in the spotlight versus a rebuilding Detroit team. That is a prime opportunity. Green Bay goes off and then you trade everybody the next day.
Now, if they struggle against Detroit, then we really...
The world's ending at that point. It's the only way it happens.
Right. Then our spidey senses are tingling and we're very alarmed from what we've seen 2 weeks in from the Green Bay Packers. Dan, one other situation that you're not going to be scared off of after 1 week.
All right, I'm going to go one more than Mitch and 5 less than you, JB. I have 2 names I want to mention. An overreaction, I think that's negative, and one that's positive, and both that I would take advantage of. On the negative side is in my Cowboys, Zeke Elliott. Wow, I can't believe how many messages I got.
All right, well, really quick.
Tony Pollard should get the job.
Here, timeout. We're one closer now because he was on my list too. Keep rolling, Dan. Keep rolling.
All right, man. So that's a good thing. I just want to say I watched that game very closely with a microscope when our patrons weren't going nuts there in our watch party. Guys, like he blocked his tail off that night. He didn't try to do too much and fumble the ball like a year ago. He's still in great shape. Pollard got a lot of the gadget work. They are trying to get Pollard more involved in the offense, but this week versus the Chargers is not as scary as a matchup. Their best run blocking O-lineman and Zach Martin comes back. And then the cupcake schedule comes up where they get some of those NFC East teams and some other soft opponents where Zeke's going to produce. Hey, is he, elite top 3? I mean, I'm not saying he's the Zeke that Zeke once was. He's a little more game script dependent these days. But the schedule will be more game script in his favor, and he's going to produce and be just fine. He could help you win a league this year, and I think he's going to be fine next year. Again, the guy's still young. The guy's still in shape. They're managing his workload. I think he's a solid play. So I'm going to react and try to get a share or two of Zeke maybe tonight at the right price because I'm not panicking. I think he's going to have a good season.
One thing on Ezekiel Elliott that I completely agree with you, but if Tony Pollard were out there getting over 50% of the work and the snaps and the routes, I'd be concerned. But Ezekiel Elliott, he was still out there. And a lot of the points that I'm going to bring up with my players and situations tonight, because it's stuff that I've really dug into this week, is usage, snap rates, if they're playing out of the slot out wide, things like that. But Ezekiel Elliott, he was still involved. He was still out there, not involved in the way that we would have loved as fantasy managers, of course. But from an NFL perspective, he still did a lot of good things for the Cowboys. And it's going to leave a sour taste in people's mouths. And there are people that are overreacting and looking to jump ship. Ezekiel Elliott was already being acquired at a discount in the offseason. And now we're double discounting it. Sign me up.
And I understand Zeke's a very patient runner. And Vita Vea was blowing up the middle. Like,
right.
You're limited what you could do. Kellen Moore is very creative. He gave Tampa something else to defend the way he used Tony Pollard. So there's a lot of game script, a game plan that factors into it.
Mitch, so, how many times over the last 2 years did we talk about, especially when we would do like weekly breakdowns and things like that, if a running back was going against Tampa, avoid them. And it's like people forget, okay, 49ers played the Lions, Cowboys played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but they just see the 5 points in your fantasy lineup and get pissed off. Pay attention to what's going on.
See, I don't even think it's that. Here's what I think. I think with the Cowboys, there's so much bias built in between Pollard and Zeke. If you switch the roles and you put Zeke as the backup, you have Pollard as the starter, you give him all of that starting work, and he has the exact same outcome that Zeke had, everybody would be saying, it's the Bucs. It's no big deal, but I'm still buying Pollard. But now since it's Zeke and everyone is trying to get rid of Zeke at this point, that's when it turns into, oh no, it's going to be the Pollard show. He's just going to get more and more work as we go. And so you could tell the bias with just switch the names. And if you know that story is going to change, if you just switch the name with the exact same production, you know it's just bias.
Week 1 it's full of confirmation bias. Hey, a player that I didn't like underperformed. I told you. But if it's the other way around, hey guys, it's only week 1. So again, a lot of my thought process here, I'm reacting, but I'm trying not to blow anything out of proportion, even if it's something, and maybe I'll take a lap a little later on here, but I'm seriously, I'm really trying not to do it. Because it's 1 week and I know we're excited. We prepared all off season for this moment and we want to jump around, and you get a few glasses of wine in you and Amari Cooper goes off. Yeah. You drop an F-bomb on Twitter. It happens sometimes. But Dan, what's your other situation here?
My other situation, probably someone who listens to Dynasty Theory and kind of knows, our takes and that we're not overreacting, tried to get Zeke off me and offer me like some bum running back and Rob Gronkowski, who I'm going to mention. And Gronk, man, like I think Gronk is a good fantasy player to have on your team. I have a few rosters this offseason where I couldn't get what I wanted because there wasn't much of a market for him. And I was okay with that because I said, you know what, there's going to be a couple games during the year where he could possibly help me. Could be a good matchup. I might have injuries to my tight end, contending teams. I mean, the guy's a Hall of Famer and he still has gas left in the tank, but I'm not going to overreact to that big game because next week, depending on the game plan, he's going to block most of the game and he's going to have 2 catches for 12 yards. And it's going to be like that all season long. Now, do I think he's going to be a little bit better than last year? I do. He had a whole offseason to kind of get in shape and learn the Tampa Bay offense and get acclimated. I think he could produce a little bit more this year. I could also see him next year going away party with Tom Brady and maybe only having a couple years on your roster. So again, I am not. I'm going to try to sell Gronk if someone's really that high on him and that opportunity presents itself.
Saw him move for a second in a tight end premium league, and it's tight end premium. I get it, but you're hoping for one last 2 right here, and I'll take the second over Gronk. All right, let me take a deep breath here. Let me rattle through this. We're at 34-25 right now. I'll be done with this by 36. Mark my words. So first up, situations that I think people are overreacting to. Austin Eckler. He wasn't targeted once in week 1, not once. A game where we saw the Chargers throw the ball 47 times, still ran a route over 50% of the time. And it's not like he was losing routes and opportunities to the other running backs. They combined for less than 25% of the total routes whenever you look at the passing attempts. He had over 60% rushing market share. That's a fantastic number, and we like to see it. So somebody that I'm still looking out looking to acquire. Austin Eckler, I talked about him last week. I'm still driving that train. Najee Harris, 100% of the Steelers running back touches. I know it wasn't pretty, but you rarely see a running back get that much work. Najee Harris looked a little bit slow at times, but I do believe conditioning is going to pick up here and somebody that can be fully utilized when they're not playing the Buffalo Bills defense. Nico Collins, a little bit lower down the totem pole there. 80% routes run in Houston. I don't expect that game script to be as positive for that team going forward. They're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. Not sexy, but still over a 10% target share for Nico Collins. Tight end room in New Orleans. Do not overreact to Juwan. Don't do it. Juwan, listen, we talked about it last week. I talked about it. Upside in the red zone, right? 2 touchdowns. He only had 9 routes run. And then to make the time here, Kyle Pitts, 20% target share, lined up everywhere, 50, 25, 25% split between inline, slot and out wide. Still somebody I want. 31 routes and then tied for second, only behind Calvin Ridley. I was 10 seconds over there, guys.
JB, that's a good list. I'm going to hammer some rapid fire quick thoughts. Justin Herbert, man, loves to throw downfield. And if you can't stop Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, why is he going to dump it off? But he will check down when the time calls for it. In Washington, the weakness was in the secondary. So I definitely like that one there. Who's your second one?
Man, you forgot already. Najee Harris. Najee.
Conditioning, offensive line still gelling, not playing the Buffalo Bills. Good point there. That's a good one. Nico, I'm going to pass on. I could care less about Nico Collins and the Houston Texans still. Good points, JB. Good points. I'm just
listen. He's still somebody that you could get thrown into a deal. Nobody I'm overly excited about in like a 12-team start 10, but 14 team start 11, 16 team. Now we're talking about Nico Collins, and I want to get that opportunity, and he's going to present it, especially after a really slow game for the receiving core outside of Brandon Cooks. And then I said Jawan Johnson. Mitch, you were ready to yell at me there.
No, I understand. Look, if I could trade him, I could. I just don't think anyone really cares, to be honest. I have him on, I think, 40% of my roster, so I have him on about 20-ish teams.
I would trade him for if I thought a pick could be an early second in tight end premium.
Well, if I could, I would, but I haven't received one offer on any of my teams for him.
Listen, you have a job because you're out in Utah. You're 2 hours behind me here and Dan. I want you to blast offers out tonight. Please, can you some Jawan for a second or Jawan for? I can do that every week. Yeah. I mean, even Jawan Johnson for trying to find a player here. If it's tight end premium, do you think you get like Jamal Williams? Or do you think everybody's just head over heels now?
I'll keep you on for Jamal Williams. I'm okay with that.
He's got a role. I wouldn't give him away if you need a tight end on your roster. So it's roster specific.
But if he didn't find the end zone those 2 times, we're not talking about him.
I'm not moving my Kylie Granson right now either for Jamal Williams. That's just not someone who I want to go and get at this point.
Man, Jamal Williams, I'm gonna be talking about him a little bit later here. But
one of those Juwan Johnson touchdowns was a busted coverage for the record too. So you can't get overexcited. Like I mean, again, JB would have caught the one pass because there was no one literally covering Mr. Johnson. And
Don't give me too much credit.
And then Kyle Pitts, JB. I'm watching that game specifically for Pitts as I took him in a lot of DFS lineups, and I'm loving how they're employing him. I'm watching them all around. But man, that Atlanta offensive line is bad. That Atlanta defensive line is bad. The Falcons got some problems. So that's the concern. It might be like I think the way they're employing him, he's going to be fine this year. Yep. What tight end would you not want with the role that he has? But the high ceiling might not be fully impacted until they get that O-line right.
I talked about his splits and where he's lining up. Only 25% of his routes are coming in line, 25% out wide, 50% from the slot. So that utilization, that's what we love to see as a tight end. And one of the big reasons that a tight end like Mike Gesicki was carrying value for 2 years when he really didn't do too much. Oh, well, he's going to be used like a wide receiver. Well, it didn't really pan out in week 1 for Mr. Gesicki. And I'm going 1,000 miles an hour because I'm just loving these conversations right now. But Mitch, you were very adamant. Hey, Matt Ryan, he's going to be starting for the Falcons in 2022. If things hold up like this, do you think that's the case still?
I'm very happy you brought that up because guess what is the situation we should be reacting to? What? It is Matt Ryan.
Let's go. I didn't even see your notes.
I actually told you it was something else earlier.
There we go. Let's hear it.
So in the offseason, I paid a lot more attention to the Calvin Ridley splits without Julio and didn't pay enough attention to the Matt Ryan splits without Julio. I went back to 2017, and the fact is Matt Ryan isn't very good when Julio isn't on the field.
You could have just listened to like 10 episodes of Dynasty Theory and caught up on that.
Thanks, John. Anyways, as I was saying, so his attempts go up because the team's worse. His attempts very slightly go up, but everything else is worse. The let's see, the interceptions go up, the touchdowns go down, the passing yards to attempts drop. I mean, really, when Matt Ryan doesn't have Julio on the field, he's a 250-yard, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, non-mobile quarterback.
And that's going to kill you.
I bought into the Arthur Smith play action game is going to help out so much because we saw Matt Ryan do it before when Shanahan was there. And this is going to work. The fact is, I don't know if it could be just the offensive line's fault, but it's not getting fixed this year either. So that really doesn't matter to me. As far as I'm concerned, like I still really like Ridley. Pitts is going to be more than fine, but I think this is absolutely going to kill Mike Davis. I don't really know if Mike Davis is going to be playable for more than a couple games because they still have Tampa Bay twice. You know, they have the Saints they have to play twice. And I can't remember who is playing this week, but I think they have another tough matchup this week. And I don't know how many times I'm going to put Matt Ryan in my starting lineup. Do I think he could be the starter there next year? I think so because he has like a $40 million cap hit if they release him. So I think he could just be a quarterback that's there that we have no faith in. But that's the situation. And I had a hard time finding one this week that I was like adamant about that is a really big issue. I think Matt Ryan right now is a huge issue in Atlanta.
I was going through, and my rostership of Matt Ryan is through the roof, and it has been for 2 or 3 years now. Mm-hmm. But you look at Matt Ryan, and it is a tough matchup, and the matchup is slipping my mind right now. If one of you want to look it up real quick, that would be useful. Dan, Mitch, either one. Don't all jump at once here. Somebody in the chat, Packy, maybe Owen, but there are a lot of lineups, especially if I have depth at wide receiver. I'm like, do I really want to go Matt Ryan in my super flex spot? Do I want to get crazy and run with, like, let's say that I have Matt Ryan, Tom Brady, and then another middling quarterback. Something really went wrong with that quarterback room.
Carson Wentz.
Yeah. I think that's kind of a similar situation. I was looking for a little bit more from Wentz, but again, maybe it's just getting acclimated with those wide receivers there.
He's only had a week of practice. It's not a big deal. But anyways,
practice. But Matt Ryan, no, it's a good one. And I don't think you can go out and move him now, but this is why I brought up who does he play next week. But I do believe, Mitch, you're correct in that it is a tougher matchup, but maybe you just got to wait for one of those games where he pops. And you can't get Jameis Winston for Matt Ryan today. I don't think you can get Daniel Jones for Matt Ryan. Can you get Derek Carr? Not after this week. Again, we talk about how quickly things change. You can't get Sam Darnold. Can you get Jared Goff for Matt Ryan today?
No. Okay, So real quick, here is their upcoming matchups.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the Buccaneers at the Giants.
Buccaneers, yep.
At Washington, at the Jets, at the Dolphins, versus the Panthers. I don't know if I'm going to play him in the first 6 weeks.
There's 2 games maybe with the Giants and
I wouldn't do it against the Giants because the Giants they're decent. They're enough to where I'm like, I don't trust Matt Ryan here on the road.
I can see that. I mean, if you have a better option, I agree. It depends what the options are. But some of those games could get really ugly. Like, I don't want Chase Young going through that whole line. Right? Holy cow. That could get scary. You know, so I definitely have a lot of concerns with Matt Ryan. And I'm glad you brought up Mike Davis as well, because he's older as it is in Dynasty. And we were kind of counting on him for getting a lot of volume. And where's that run game going? There's some major concerns in Atlanta because it is a below average offensive line going into this year. They don't have an offensive line coach that's known for, like, you know, working his magic. Their defense, again, is a non-draftable, horrible defense. It's going to be a long year in Atlanta.
So Matt Ryan, if you can cash out for 2022 first, do you do it today?
Oh yeah.
100%.
I don't care if he's like my second quarterback and I was planning on playing him this week, I'd move him.
There are a lot of situations looking at my lineups, looking at my rosters coming into the season. I had it slated, okay, Matt Ryan, he's my quarterback too, and I feel good about that. And then I had a Jameis Winston because we weren't really sure. Jameis is moving into that number 2 spot for me, without a doubt. I mean, depending on the matchup, Ben might be pushing up over Matt Ryan in a lot of spots. So I think that's a really good one and something that is concerning, much more concerned with the Matt Ryan Atlanta Falcons situation than Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay. And I think I don't know that had to be said. All right, Dan, hit us with the truth here. Situation that we should be reacting to. We should be.
Yeah, and I'm cheating again. I'm a little more than Mitch and less than your list, probably, JB. I have like 2.5 situations here. So, and one could probably go on either list, but Jerry Jeudy's injury, I want myself some Jerry Jeudy. I'm so relieved it's just a high ankle sprain. And I hope people are feeling sorry or concerned or don't want to wait 5-6 weeks, whatever it is, till he comes back. But, man, if I could get myself some Jerry Jeudy, I'm going to definitely try to this week because I wasn't able to in the offseason, but maybe that injury opened the door. The Arizona Cardinals, I'm just kind of putting their situation as a category of I am reacting to. They really impressed me this week as a team. Is Christian Kirk back? I might drink the Kool-Aid one more time. I moved Kyler ahead of Lamar Jackson in my rankings. And for some, that he may have already been there. I know it's, where your stance is on these quarterbacks, but he really looked good and looked good in the pocket, not just running. So I could see a big year for Nuke and a rebound for Christian Kirk. So I might be buying a little more Arizona. And then my maybe was Deebo Samuel. He really could be the number one there. I think back a couple years ago, I think it was like Chad Johnson, some other people. There was just some really high praise for his ability if he could stay healthy. And boy, did he get a lot of volume. And with Aiyuk kind of in limbo right now, Deebo might be one I need to react more to.
Deebo's an interesting one because I haven't thought about him too much just because we talked about the 49ers and all of the different aspects and the running back situation and Brandon Aiyuk really being limited there. So Deebo, I don't know if you can go out and acquire him today, at least at a solid price. But if you believe he continues to excel, maybe that inflated price isn't the ceiling. Maybe his price continues to rise. So we talk about acquiring players at what appears to be their peak or their ceiling, but then it continues to go and go and go. So Deebo Samuel's a good one. Mitch, do you have any thoughts there on anything?
Yeah, I was going to add. So Dan brought up Kyler Murray, how good Hopkins can do. One thing that stood out to me in that game was actually something I was going to bring up is how good their defense is. Yeah. I mean, you don't accidentally walk into 5 sacks. I mean, that's not something you could accidentally do. And Chandler Jones did an amazing job at it. And it's happening a lot because Watt's on the other side. So people are like, no, we need a double Watt going into the year. Then all of a sudden Jones blows him up. And so while you think, oh, that's good, maybe they could be in a lot of shootout games. So you have the other team going against them. But you had what should have been a good shootout game. And I was just looking up real quick. I mean, Julio had 30 yards. A.J. Brown had 50 yards. Henry had less than 60. Yep. And they get the Vikings this week. And I think Dalvin will get his because he gets enough through the receiving game. But I'm really worried that offensive line for the Vikings is just going to completely collapse and Kirk's going to be on his back all game like he was with the Bengals. And so while we don't talk about defense a lot, I mean, some of these defenses, we always get the ones that catapult to the top of the league each year, right? The Cardinals can easily be one of those ones that catapult up above everybody else.
And even if they don't become, Chandler Jones isn't going to get 5 sacks every week in that type of scenario, but it takes so much pressure off Kyler Murray to have to do everything. And then like we saw it last year, the dude was beat up, man. He was fatigued, and then you're pressing, you're trying to do too much and you're playing hurt. Now it's a little bit less pressure. The Edmonds-Connor combination, O-line played well. Defense takes some pressure off. So it really puts him in a better situation where Lamar was trying to do too much last night, was taking some hits, fumbled, yada, yada.
All right. I have 7 here, so I'm going to try to be somewhat quick. But things that we need to be reacting to, or just in general, things that I believe to continue, even with Jamison Crowder out and Elijah Moore doing nothing, Denzel Mims ran 3 routes. I know there was some hope. Hey, he had the food poisoning. He's going to bounce back. He was able to find success in 2020. I don't think that's going to happen with Denzel Mims moving forward. If I can package him up with anything, I know it's going to be tough after that game, but maybe one splash game can get us there. I completely went out. And there, Dan, you're making a face. It's very unlikely.
You may be waiting a while.
I know, but I think that's something
almost droppable at this point, to be honest.
It's getting there, but don't tell people that. Let me get something first. You talked about Gronk, Dan. I think a later round tight end in Dynasty because of his age that really caught my eye because we weren't sure I was going to play out Jared Cook. When we look at it between him and Donald Parham, that tight end room is his if week 1 is any indication of what we see throughout the rest of the season. Parham, I talked about routes run and snaps and all that good stuff that I was really diving into. 26% of the total team pass attempts, Donald Parham ran a route. Over 65% for Jared Cook. And then just another player there, Jalen Guyton. He's the clear number 3 receiver there. When we look at the wide receivers, I know Eckler, I know Jared Cook, they're going to be involved, obviously, in the passing game. But week 1, over 10% target share for a wide receiver that's essentially free to cover bye weeks in deeper leagues. See if you can get Jalen Guyton thrown in a few trades. Again, not the key piece. There we go. The key piece that we're looking to acquire, but see if you can get him thrown in a situation that I think we're going to continue to see. And it's something that in our projections, Mitch, we had it this way. So this is the one I'm kind of taking a lap, but not really. But the split between the Pittsburgh Steelers receivers, a lot of it comes down to the fact that an offensive line has not improved as much as people would have liked. So we have a situation where the target distribution, about 20% Juju, 20% Deontay, 15% Claypool. A lot of people, they wanted to see Claypool make that leap. And I had in my notes here, and I'm glad I ran it by the Discord and I ran it by you guys. In my notes, I said, let's see if I can move a Claypool for Judy if people are impatient. And the vote was unanimous. Judy. I was like, okay, maybe I'm off my rocker here. So I'll add a second to Claypool. And most people were still saying Judy, but that's something that I would look to get done. If somebody's impatient, I don't think Chase Claypool's situation gets much better. 5-6 targets most games. He'll have a splash game every once in a while, especially because they get him involved in the running game every once in a while. But still, Deontay and Juju, they're the 2 guys there that I've been chasing all off season, and I it's going to continue. Christian Kirk, Dan, you mentioned it, 70% routes run compared to Rondale Moore at 44%. I know Rondale Moore's a rookie, but there was a lot of hype around him throughout the offseason from what we saw in the preseason. And with those 70% of routes, we saw a 16% target share for Christian Kirk. But again, if he didn't score the touchdowns, would we be talking about him? Probably not. But that is somebody that I'm not going out and actively acquiring, but maybe he piques my interest if he's creeping on my bench still, because I do have a few shares of Christian Kirk. Before I move on, Mitch, you had something?
Sorry, real quick. Yeah, I was just going to say with Kirk, like, it was funny. There was a play during the game where Kyler tried to throw a go route to Rondale Moore. And like, you could just, it's not going to work. That's like just one of those plays to where you're like, it probably looked good on the board, but it's never going to work well in real life. You put Kirk in that situation, that could work with Kirk every single time they do it. Because when you get down the red zone, I think a lot of teams, they're going to bracket up Nuke, and then someone else is going to have to win. And I don't plan on AJ Green winning at this point. Moore will be able to do it if it's slant or something. But if it's a go route or anything like that, Christian Kirk could have just one of those Sterling Shepard type years.
Yep. And at his price, that is more than enough. So maybe you do go out. Maybe you just convince me. Maybe I do go out and actively look to acquire Christian Kirk. It would be difficult after that game. But if somebody is so sour and they're like, I just got to get him off my roster, maybe I see if I can make something work and I bring him onto my team. Again, much more appealing in deeper leagues. There is a number 1 receiver in Indianapolis. It is Zach Pascal. It is. Everybody's hyped about. Listen, Dan, I'm sorry. Everybody is hyped about Michael Pittman. Zach Pascal, 89% out of the slot, ran a ton of routes. We saw some good things in utilization from Jonathan Taylor, from Naheem Hines. Jack Doyle even got involved. So hang on to those Kylan Granson shares. We got to wait a little bit. But for somebody that I was picking up, and I could drop some receipts, but I was actively looking in waiver wires and free agent lists and picking him up for nothing a few weeks ago. Zach Pascal is somebody that came out and show that he can be a wide receiver one. And yes, again, it's the touchdown in a wide receiver one on an offense that is lacking receiving weapons. I'm not saying you throw him on Dallas, Mr. Pascal is going to be a wide receiver one. So, Mitch, I'm not going to throw the buzzword out there and say Zach Pascal is an alpha. I'm not saying that. But until right. Until you're like, what's in that water, JB? So until T.Y. Hilton comes back, and even when he does come back, Zach Pascal, another player, maybe we can package something together, some lower end draft picks, something that we could at least kick over to the manager that has Zach Pascal. James Robinson, that was ugly, man. The usage, it was just absurd. Do you think it turns around? Because I don't. So, this isn't a James Robinson thing. If you want to let him sit on your bench, let him. But the days of getting a first for him, like we pushed, and I got aggressive there. Pushed.
I'll agree with that. I think
those days are gone.
If you go back, I agree. Those days are gone with James Robinson because that's all that it took to sink his value, and we knew that. Go back and look. They ran a pass play, I think 20 times in the first half. They only ran 8 times. But if you actually look at what happened, it was a false start. They're 1st and 15. They throw 3 times. They run once. There's a holding penalty. They throw 3 times. They're out. Then Trevor Lawrence throws an interception. And then they have one good drive, and they get like 5 rushing plays. Hyde's doing it. James Robinson was looking good to start. They score. The next drive, 2 plays, and it's an interception. So while I know the value on James Robinson is down, I'm not moving him for a reduced price right now.
Are you going out and acquiring at that price?
No, I'm not done yet.
Their schedule is not going to get easier, Mitch.
I haven't acquired any shares of him this offseason that I can remember. I have moved all that I can. But I'm just saying the ones that I have on my roster right now, I'm willing to still use him as my running back 3, running back 4. Because I really think he's got the snaps. I know Carlos Hyde had 9 rushing attempts and James Robinson had 6. James Robinson was on the field 2/3 more than Carlos Hyde was. Like, I'm not worried about that at all. I just think it was one of those games to where the offense got a little too cute, got behind on some penalties, and by the time the half was over, they couldn't run the ball because they were down like 27-3 at that point, or 27-7, whatever it was.
If somebody offered, and I don't think this is ever going to happen, but a first for James Robinson in a second, you take it?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And then you wake up from that dream and realize it was not reality.
I hope I dreamed that tonight.
All right, well, last one, and I think the Detroit Lions fan is going to yell at me. Jamal Williams and Deandre Swift, I think they can coexist. You look at our projections. If you're in the Patreon, you've been staring at these, studying these constantly, but the way we saw this going was close to a 50-50 split, and I know DeAndre Swift, is it going to change whenever he's fully healthy? I don't know. I don't think Anthony Lynn, from the offensive coordinator perspective, is going to want to go bell cow. So we saw a 20% target share for DeAndre Swift, 15 for Jamal Williams, and then we saw a 45% split between the two on the ground. So I think both can coexist. Another player that I want to get thrown into deals, another player that I want to package some crap up, pull the Dan Lamagna specialty, package something up, throw him Marcel Aitman, Hard Knocks highlights from a couple years back, but give me Jamal Williams as well. I think he's somebody that I'm going to be firing up in a lot of lineups until we see that DeAndre Swift gets the bulk of the work. But I think both can coexist on a team that's going to be playing from behind. Jared Goff's going to want to get the ball out, and he's going to find those two guys and TJ Hawkinson, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown, who saw over 70% route tree in week 1. That number is going to continue to go up, and he's going to hopefully
missed him for a super easy touchdown too. Of course, Goff overthrew him, but
Well, I think Amon-Ra is somebody that I'm still not completely out on, especially with all the shares I have. All right, any thoughts there on the Lions? I'm not lying about that one.
People might not know. Maybe I am a Detroit Lions fan. Don't like to breathe that out loud a lot. But, I mean, this offense has to run the ball. If they fall behind like that, we've seen what happens. They didn't catch up until San Francisco took half of their starting defensive players off the field. and then they started to catch up. And so I actually think if you compare Jamal Williams to Latavius Murray in previous seasons for the Saints, to where, if Swift goes out, you're really happy to have Williams. If Swift is in, like, you'll play him if you have to in a flex, but you really don't want to. That's how I see Jamal Williams this year.
But they were still both utilized early in the game. But again, how much of it comes down to they want to kind of get DeAndre Swift really into the flow of things. But looking at it, that one was bad. Packy, is that my pun, my lion pun? Come on. Hey, I've been good with puns lately, guys.
That was a Rock Jungle Cruise joke, I think.
That was a great movie, too.
Hit a lot of JB jokes in that movie.
Well, maybe I do need to go see it. All right, so if there's nothing else about the Detroit Lions, went a little bit long tonight. I thought it was going to be a quicker episode, but of course not.
Final thoughts.
Dan, 134 episodes in, week 2 is right around the corner. We need football every night. I want it every night. So Dan, what do you got for our listeners' final thought heading into week 2?
Hey, need some nights to study here, JB, man. Not a lot on the final thought front tonight, other than it's free agent waiver wire time now. Work the waiver wire here tonight. Go back, play back this episode here tonight. I think we've given some good tips of guys that, maybe are on the free agent wire that you could acquire. I think we're able to see some guys that are dead weight, probably on the bottom of your roster, and just keep improving. But don't overreact. Learn from this episode. It's only been 1 week.
But that's the thing. We're trying to walk that fine line and no take luck. We don't want to overreact because that's our guy. We don't want to overreact because we faded that guy and I still want nothing to do with him. But we want to pay attention to situations that we believe will continue. And that's kind of the point of reacting to these situations. Is it going to continue, or is it going to go back to what maybe we expected, or just, a completely different route from what we saw in week 1? Mitch, 134 episodes, and what do you got?
Just continue with the theme. It's, if you felt like your team was a contender going into this year, week 1 shouldn't change that. I've actually seen in a few different league group chats that people are already like, nope, I don't have what it takes. I'm ready to rebuild. It's been a week. Like, you don't even know what's going on. I mean, we're guessing with, the best that we can about what's going to happen. I don't know if my teams that won this week with the highest point scored, I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. I'll find that out in 3 or 4 weeks at this point. But just let those 3 or 4 weeks happen before you go and blow up your team.
And it goes the other way as well. Just because you had an explosive week 1, hey, now I'm a contender. Look what I just put up 200 points. How can I not be a contender? So I'm going to move my draft picks. I'm going to get rid of my young guys. Hey, but look at the players that carried me in week 1. I had one roster specifically. It's in a safe league, and I looked at it and I put up 200 points, and I knocked off a team that was the second highest scorer. And I looked at my team and I was like, this team is trash. Like, on my spreadsheet, I have a lot of red there. And I'm like, how the heck did this team put this up? So that's one where I'm kind of taking into consideration, maybe they overperformed in week 1, and I'm not going all in just because of that one game.
So do not trade for Elijah Mitchell on that team. It's kind of like the moral of the whole story here.
That's going to be such a fun, it is the moral of the story, but it's going to be such a fun dynamic over the next few weeks. There's going to be a lot of victory laps one way or the other. We'll see if we jump in. Hopefully we can. So make sure you follow the show on Twitter at Dynasty Theory FF. Click the link in the episode description, YouTube, the podcast feed. Check out our Patreon. It is free through the rest of September. A lot of great things going on over there. I'm distracted by Dan talking to The Rock in the background. For Mitch Sorensen, Dan Lamagna, apparently Dwayne The Rock Johnson, I'm John Bauer. We'll see you next week.